Welcome everyone to the game of the world champion Domaraju Gukesh as he takes fort at an all-important event, the FIDE Grand Swiss 2025. It's one of the most important events from the point of view of the qualification to the candidates. You play 11 rounds of strong open tournament, and if you manage to finish in top 2, you get into the candidates. This is the fastest way to get into the all-important candidates event. Of course, Gukesh, being the world champion, has no reason to qualify to the candidates, but he's here to face the best players in the world and show that perhaps he is the strongest classical player out there. He's currently the 3rd seed in the tournament. Top seed is Pragnananda, 2nd seed is Arjun Erigaisi, and the 3rd seed is Gukesh. As he adjusts his pieces, this is going to be very exciting. Gukesh has been playing quite decent chess this year. He finished joint first at the Tata Steel Chess in January. Then he played quite okay in Norway Chess. But in the Grand Chess Tour events, he hasn't been able to click. His opponent in this game is the very well-known French Grandmaster Etienne Bacrot. The players are ready, a handshake, and off we go. The time control is 100 minutes for first 40 moves with a 30-second increment, and then you have 50 minutes for the next 20 moves, and then another 15 additional minutes for the end of the game as Gukesh opens with the Karo Khan. A very interesting choice against Bacrot. D4 played, and I think for Gukesh, when he's trying to play for a win with black pieces, he chooses the Karo Khan because E4, E5 is his main weapon, but Karo Khan is played because he wants an unbalanced position. He gets his bishop to F5, knight to F3 played, and now pawn to E6. This system that Bacrot is using is supposed to be very, very powerful for white. You gain space, you quickly complete your development, and you castle your king. So that's all that you need for a good opening position. H6 played by Gukesh. This is a multi-purpose move. Your idea is to make square for the bishop on H7 and also expand with the move G5 if it's possible. Now the knight comes to D2. This knight can be useful on the B3 square to stop C5 from coming in. Knight comes out to D7. You can see how black's position looks a bit constricted here, but it has a lot of pent-up energy. And you will see that one of the most beautiful things about Karo Khan is that you take care of your light squared bishop. Because generally in the French defense, the bishop is right back there. He goes G5 and gaining space on the king side. This looks like an aggressive move, but it is well known. And now Gukesh goes bishop to G7. So he has managed to put his pieces all comfortably and will castle next. Then trying to break with C5 or F6. The rook comes to E1. And now Gukesh comes back. He still has 1 hour 42 minutes. He castles here. And Bacrot goes pawn to H3. A useful move. Perhaps to go knight H2 at some point. Maybe break with F4. Gukesh goes B6. I like this move. He's trying for the C5 break. And Etienne goes bishop to E3, stopping C5. Although it can be pursued with rook to C8. That's what he does. He brings his rook to C8. He's planning to break with C5 now. And white, in order to create some play on the queen side, goes pawn to A5. And Gukesh now goes C5. He hits in the center and bishop goes to A6, attacking the rook here on C8. Gukesh plays his rook to C7. And now the threat is to take on D4, putting pressure on the C2 pawn. So pawn takes pawn. And he takes back A takes B6. And white goes the very solid move C3. Now Gukesh has 30 minutes lead on the clock here. And he could potentially respond in many ways. He thinks for a very long time. He thinks for nearly 30 minutes and takes the pawn on D4. His point, of course, is if you take back with the pawn, bishop C2 is game over. So that's the reason why Bacrot takes with the knight. And now, important to note that knight takes pawn does not work because of takes, knight F5, and bishop B6 is hanging. So Gukesh here goes bishop E4. He's attacking the knight, but also the E5 pawn is now a bit weak. Knight comes to D2. The bishop is attacked, and you don't really want to be losing this bishop here. So he goes bishop to G6. Also, taking this pawn would not have been a great move because of takes, and knight takes E6 ideas. In fact, you can start with knight E6, F6, knight E4. But let's not get into those lines. Bishop G6, knight B5, attacks the rook. The rook moves up to C6. And now knight comes to D4. He's attacking the rook once again on C6. And Gukesh moves his rook to C5. It's actually quite dangerously placed. And maybe knight B3 attacking the rook is possible. But Bacrot goes knight F3 attacking with the bishop. Maybe not the best move here. Black can simply go rook to A5. Yes, he plays his rook to A5. A good move here. And now Bacrot moves his bishop to D4. Kind of getting this pawn on E5 controlled. Queen comes up to C7. Putting further pressure on E5. 3 pieces are now lined up here. And queen comes up to E2. How is Gukesh going to put more pressure? He takes on A1. Rook takes on A1. And now brings his rook to A8. Pinning the bishop here. And Etienne moves his rook away to E1, defending the E pawn. Also, the bishop is protected here. But it's time to attack it further with knight to C5. An excellent move, attacking the bishop on A6. Now, of course, you have to go bishop b5 as the d3 square is also controlled. He goes bishop b5 here, and now Gukesh comes back in and he swoops his rook into a2, attacking the pawn on b2. A fantastic move. He goes knight back to f1. Now the pawn on b2 is under pressure, but bishop comes into e4. And it's interesting to see how this bishop comes back, goes back, and every time he does that, putting pressure on the white's position. He goes knight to g6 now. If you take on e4, then you have d4 attacking the knight. Also, the e5 pawn is hanging. So he goes knight to h5, attacking the bishop on g7. He goes bishop to h8, calmly dropping the bishop back. Now you have to play carefully here. Knight to d2 played by Etienne Bacro, and this is a very dangerous move. He should have played something like king h1, g3, but knight d2 attacks this bishop on e4, but he is giving up the b2 pawn, and Gukesh takes the pawn, asking the question to his opponent, why did you do that? Well, Bacro says, because I want to get the a file. That's why I gave you this pawn on b2. But Gukesh now can simply drop his queen back, queen to c8, stopping all rook a8 ideas. And pawn to c4, now attacking the rook on b2. And white is hoping for some tricks to happen, but Gukesh has the tricks in hand. He takes on d2, beautiful move, queen takes d2, and now the knight can jump into b3 with a fork. Very powerful fork here. Queen comes up to e3, attacking the knight, and now you can take on a1, but he takes on d4, which is also very powerful, because after queen takes d4, you have bishop e5 attacking the queen and skewering the rook on a1. Fantastic chess here by Gukesh. He goes queen d1 back row, but taking on a1 won't be a good idea because queen a1 and a mate is threatened here. So he simply takes the pawn on c4, and now he has 3 pawns and a bishop for a rook, which is a lot of material. Rook comes to a4. A very interesting idea is c3, giving up the bishop c2 and bishop b2 here, but instead he goes bishop d5. Queen comes up to e2, attacking the pawn now 3 times. He pushes his pawn forward with c3, but now back row comes back. He's threatening bishop g6, and queen takes e5 in the position. So Gukesh goes queen c7, defending his bishop here. And look at how this bishop is an absolute monster, attacking as well as defending here on a8. Bishop goes back to c2. And now Gukesh, making his 40th move, goes bishop h2 check. And the players will get extra 50 minutes on the clock for the next 20 moves. Bishop h2 check. And now back row comes back to the board and plays king f1. Well, it's important to come back to e5 now because there are check threats in the air. And so he comes back. And maybe it's also necessary to just play your king back to g1. Yes, king to g1 played. He goes king f8. I love this move. This is maybe one of the most important moves that Gukesh has played here, because now knight f6 check does not come. Also, the king is no longer trapped here, can come out on e7 if needed. Queen comes up to d3. By the way, this is important because if bishop g6, fg6, the pawn simply runs away. So that's why queen d3 played. And now Gukesh jumps in with the knight to h4. A very good move. You don't have time to enter with the queen because of check on h2 and taking the pawn on g2 with a check as well. So he tries to play f3, blocking this bishop. But now it's time for the queen to enter in. Queen c5. You can see Gukesh getting up after every move. He's feeling that energy with him. He knows that he's winning. He gives a check to the king. If king h1, there is queen f2 with a very powerful attack. So king f1 is kind of forced. And then you have multiple ways to win. You can play b5 here with the idea of bishop c4, which is totally winning. The other idea is knight to f5 as Gukesh plays, threatening knight e3 check with the deadly consequences here. Gukesh is winning, and back row extends his hand in resignation there. Gukesh starts off the Grand Swiss 2025 with a very nice win. He actually played almost a flawless game of chess in the Caro-Kann, and this might be a very important game for Gukesh because it sets the tone right for him. And if he manages to get things moving like he has done in 2024 when it comes to the candidates or the FIDE Olympiad, then it will be difficult to stop him. For now, Gukesh begins with a win, and the top 2 seeds, Prag and Arjun, both drew their games. So that means Gukesh will move on to board number 1 from round number 2 onwards. We'll see how it continues for Gukesh, the world champion. But for now, a very exciting game of chess in the Caro-Kann and a very instructive game as well. We hope you